Yes. Yeah, it was weird to see Jeffrey without you.
How are you?
Hello, how are you?
Hello? Good, how are you? Okay. Yeah, of course, yeah, absolutely. Thanks for letting me know.
No, it's allergies.
No.
Wait, I was on a trip. It's rough. Yes. Yeah, it's 168. They just started this season. So it's super exciting.
All right. Good. How's the college doing? They were good, thanks for asking.
And it was for your son, right? Do you have any favorites?
He does. And he's just turning 18 today.
No.
Well, I'm having dinner with him for this. Let the record reflect.
Yes, sir.
My youngest is 18 today, and here I am, so having dinner with him.
Gonna take him home a cupcake.
Well, he's not at home, so he's at school. So good. Yeah, it's fun.
Take you home.
Well, he's been doing all his tours for the last 8 months. Yeah. So we looked at a couple of places up in New England. Good. Yeah.
This is the time to go do that.
Yeah.
You can stand it up there in February.
Yeah. But yeah, we went the weekend that was snowing.
Yeah.
So I haven't driven in like a serious amount of snow in a long time.
Yeah. A friend of mine did her master's in choral conducting at UMass. And I went up the night before her interview to have dinner with her. And it was, this time of year, it was the greatest place.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's one of the schools we went to, and it was great,
It's so-
super cold.
So-
And it's so windy on that campus with some of that tall buildings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I spent a week there this past summer.
What's that?
I spent a week there this past summer as well.
Oh, yes, fantastic.
Before I went to their home.
Yeah, I grew up about 10 minutes.
And what's that?
Yeah. Just off of Anime.
Heaven's sake, she lived in Granby. Oh,
What's
how
that?
funny. This friend of mine who did her master's there.
Oh, is that
Lived
right?
in Granby. Yeah.
Ah. That's where I grew up.
We took our daughter to the wing with the colleges in the summer.
Yeah.
It was brutal. And a lot of the bishops' offices weren't air conditioned, and obstacles to it was.
So now.
My wife and I got married at Mount Holyoke, which is
Oh, yeah.
right up there,
Yeah.
and it was 105
Hello there.
degrees
Oh,
in June,
Just works
beginning
out
of
with the
June.
sound system.
So I hear you.
Get that.
It can get awfully hot up there.
It was.
Hey, Julie, are you able to willing to make real-time edits in the session?
Well, let's see if this works. Yes, I can get online.
Cindy, are we recording?
We are recording, yes, at 7 o'clock.
All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order and ask Cindy to read the statement of the Open Public Meetings Act into the record, please.
This meeting is being held in compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act with notice provided to the Trenton Times and the Hunterdon County Democrat. And the meeting agenda was posted on the bulletin board at City Hall and the city's website at www.lambertville.nj.org. Roll call.
Yes, please.
Brian Kelly,
Here.
Paul Cool,
Here.
Sean Goodwin,
Here.
Michelle Harris,
Here.
David Minna,
Here.
Paul Stevens,
Present.
Julia Taylor.
Here.
Councilman Lyde.
Here.
Mayor No.
Everyone, please rise for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you here. We'll begin this evening's meeting by taking a look at the February 10th meeting minutes. I think that there were potentially some suggested edits to this. We want to start with those.
Oh, okay, yeah, it's like, so at the last meeting, I thought that although initially, the discussion had started on the 10th meeting about just, looking at the 4th round, that, there was, comments by Julia Taylor and myself that, we were interested in also considering 3rd round, and I think that by the end of that, you kind of got there. And I don't know that the minutes really captured that, the original minutes. So I thought that that should be included or edited out. I mean, that discussion that followed should be included in part of the minutes.
Since we do have a
I have the minutes in front of me. It was a very brief overview of it. It says meeting minutes, Councilman Lyde asked members if they had an opportunity to review the January 22nd, 2025 meeting minutes. Paul Stevens commented that we should amend the section where the committee discussed the 4th round to include the 3rd and 4th because they were intertwined. Councilman Lyde asked for a motion to approval subject to the correction. Brian Kelly made the motion to approve the minutes as amended. Paul Stevens seconded the motion.
okay, so those are not the February 10th minutes, those were the January.
No, that's the February 10th.
Right.
Those were the February 10th.
All right.
That was to correct.
Okay,
The
January.
February,
Yeah.
All right, so that was noted in the meeting.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Noted there.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so we're good.
Yeah, I thought, I mean.
All right, I wasn't at the last meeting, so.
I know,
wasn't
that's why
aware
I
that we were
was,
good or
I
not.
didn't know where you wanted to go with
No,
that.
I just, you were looking like you wanted to say something, so, were there other thoughts on the February 10th minutes? Yeah, Elaine?
Yeah, this is easy and it's a factual correction on page 2, number 7, Roman numeral 7 under vacant land analysis, the second paragraph that answers the question, how does the vacant land relate to the properties to investigate?
Okay.
The second sentence is the new law throws one more wrinkle, colon, realistic development and unmet need. Realistic development and unmet need have always been the elements of a vacant land adjustment. So I think we can fix that just by saying one more wrinkle, RE, realistic development and unmet need.
Just
It
add
adds-
in,
Excuse me?
just add.
Yeah.
Regarding.
But no, that's a grammatical issue I will leave to them. But yes, it is regarding the realistic development and unmet need. It's one more requirement, but the underlying
Okay.
has always been there.
Now that we're looking at this, I just didn't dominate previously, but we have the next sentence says realistic development means you have to deliver. Unmet need is what you will try to deliver.
That's correct.
That's correct.
What does have to deliver mean?
You have to have a firm plan in place, a realistic opportunity to provide those units.
Yeah, I think, I mean, fine for the minutes for that purpose, but I think this is where the collective we in town have gotten hung up over and over and over again. So we'll leave it for this, but I think like that have to deliver, sounds like the city's on the hook to cause to be built,
To provide a realistic opportunity to develop.
which is different than causing to be built.
Okay,
So,
Well, in that case, I think the minutes should reflect
oh,
Yeah.
that. So,
So then you would suggest that it says what and where?
realistic development means you must provide a realistic opportunity for the development of affordable units.
Must provide a realistic opportunity for,
development of units. Great, thanks for that.
I'm good. That was the only correction I had.
Anyone else? Hearing none, I would ask for a motion to approve the February 10th, 2025 meeting minutes. So moved. Is there a second? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I abstain, those
I
in
abstain too.
Okay.
Cool and the mayor abstain, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
So moving on, mission statements. Everybody have a chance to look at, and I'm not, again, not sure, actually, maybe the February 10th minutes, excuse me. We have what appear to be two different, two draft statements for, the mission statement. Is that true?
Yes,
Okay, and was this discussed at the meeting last time, or we still drafting?
no, it was discussed, and the committee was to just review them between the two meetings and then come today prepared to adopt one versus the other. I'll just state, and Paul, if you feel this is incorrect, we work together on this, so they're not in conflict, they're just different versions of similar ideas,
Mhm.
so.
Ran out of time at the Super Bowl to finalize it before.
Maybe we should start asking you two if you have a particular version that you prefer.
Well, go ahead, you want to?
Well, I was gonna say, draft two, I prefer, I just, thought it was a little bit more, I don't know, expressive of what we're gonna do and what we were gonna take in consideration, in terms of, coming to a recommendation finally to the council for what the council would then do. We weren't gonna do anything, in terms of, they're the ones that ultimately have to decide as council. We can only make recommendations, and basically it was based on what we heard at the first meeting about being open, and also including the third and fourth round.
Have anything?
The first version was my version, and so that's what I would leave for the committee to consider. It's just a matter of which language do you prefer. Like I said, I don't think substantively they're different. I think it's just language choice, and I prefer the first.
Members?
I don't have a strong feeling between the two. My only comment or desire in the mission statement is that we could, as these both do, we continue to recognize our responsibility with the third and fourth round, but that we acknowledge that it is my goal, I hope, that we are here to have a comprehensive process, that we're not just here to live and die by the Fair Share Housing Center and the court's timelines, that we're here to address our needs proactively rather than reactively.
Anyone else want to express a preference?
Do you have a suggestion as to where you would like to add the comprehensive process?
I'm really bad at writing on the fly, but I'd be happy to write a sentence and submit it to Michelle and Paul or you and the mayor, whomever.
Or you could just put proactively at the very beginning, where the AHAC will proactively develop. Trying to stress the fact that we're being proactive and not reactive, but ultimately, in the time, it seems like we do have some deadlines that we want to meet and stay focused on.
Yeah, I might I might add, I mean, some different places in both versions, but in both versions, we acknowledge, which I agree with, that we're addressing the third and fourth rounds, like, we have to do that. I might add something there that is either a separate sentence or another clause that says that we are I'm really done with this, that we are thinking about the overall process in addition to these clear cut.
The first sentence in version 1 talks about a holistic strategy. So that's kind of broadest to more specific, right? The first sentence is the broadest way we're looking at this. And then we get to more specifics as the language goes on.
And I guess I'd also add in the first sentence, it also, at least in the second draft, it doesn't mention third or fourth round. It talks about our responsibilities. And I put responsibilities in there as opposed to our obligations, because obligations sounds like we're just addressing the third and fourth round ultimately. But we've heard it discussed before, this is bigger than just that we need to do this, that it's the right thing to do. And so that's kind of why I chose, affordable housing responsibilities.
The only thing, I'm just gonna jump in here with one thought. So currently this is an ad hoc committee. If in June, the committee feels as though, and I hope that we do, that we will continue with an advisory committee. I feel strongly that it's a great thing for us to be doing. Then we will have to develop an ordinance that allows for this permits to structure. So I guess I would just be mindful that we don't necessarily have to get years down the road. We're looking 6 months down the road, and then we may end up recalibrating based on kind of what our experience has been over the next few months, and what we think our needs are going ahead, and then embodying all of that in kind of an ordinance. So just a thought there about.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine, I guess. So I put in a suggested edit as proactive, holistic in the first sentence of both versions, which for now, I guess, addresses my needs. Mayor, take your point. We'll deal with that in June, I guess.
Right.
or-
Yeah. Any other thoughts? Is there a motion to adopt one or the other from someone?
I think they're both really good. When I read both of them, trying to see which one sort of resonated a little bit more, where I thought more people would be able to easily read it and understand, which obviously is the goal of mission statement. I thought I like Michelle's a little bit more. Sorry, Paul. So I would make a motion that we incorporate that subject to the change that she was made on it.
Is there a second on that?
Second.
So, I think we should probably do a roll call, right?
Brian Kelly,
Yes.
Paul Poole,
Yes.
Sean Goodwin,
Yes.
Michelle Harris,
Yes.
David Minow,
Yes.
Paul Stevens,
Yes.
Julie Taylor. Yes. Councilman Lyons,
Yes.
Mayor Noah.
Yes. Good, thank you. So we'll have the word proactive in there, and we have a mission statement. Well done, thank you for your work on that. And now on to kind of where are we with the frequently asked questions? John?
I'll take it because it's mostly my fault. We have a pretty good draft. I wouldn't say we haven't shared it because it's not quite ready to share, and in part because, and I'll take the blame for this. I've been doing a couple different things at once while we were working on the FAQs and just trying to collate some of the key documents in a way that we can make them. They're all available on the city website, and kudos to everybody who keeps it up to date. It's a ton of work. But maybe we can have some format that makes it easy for people to read something that's relevant and click the link right there, and they know exactly what goes with what. So slow down the process a little bit, but we promised to send a draft for review ASAP.
Thank you.
Don't
That's great.
don't tell my boss.
I recognize
how much
it's
work I've been
I
doing on
recognize
this.
it's a lot of work, and I'm going to give you some thanks in a few minutes when we talk about the spreadsheet. So thanks for your work on that. All right, so stay tuned on that. Elaine will probably just have a brief
vacant land analysis was?
Very brief. As I said at the last meeting, what we have to do is to make sure that no newly vacant properties have become available. See what has happened to properties that were originally on the vacant land adjustment list that generated last round's RDP. We are in the process of doing that. I left a voicemail and sent a follow-up email for our tax assessor and immediately got a response from Cindy E. saying, can I help with this? So she is working on that. I will say I did check the state GIS layer that they use to calculate the land capacity analysis, the land capacity factor for every town in New Jersey. And the number for Lambertville is 0, which bolsters my assumption, subject to final confirmation, that we will in fact have a 0 fourth round realistic development potential. We will need to address our entire obligation through unmet need.
And redevelopment.
Well, 25% has to be through properties that are likely to redevelop. Yes.
Only just in case any members of the public don't know why we're doing the vacant land analysis, can you just explain that to them briefly?
So a vacant land analysis is basically an inventory of every vacant property in the city and an examination of whether each property, either alone or if they are adjacent properties jointly owned together, could support development of enough housing to generate some affordable units. And the usual rule of thumb, the minimum rule of thumb really, is minimum density of 6 units an acre, be able to generate at least 5 new units, one of which would be deed restricted as affordable. So we did a vacant land analysis for the 3rd round and essentially what happens is every property that is deemed able to support affordable housing goes into a total called the realistic development potential. And in the 3rd round we had an entire obligation of 137. And we did a vacant land analysis that brought that number down to an 88 unit realistic development potential. And the remainder goes into this other bucket called unmet need, which the city is required to take some measures to try to generate additional units to satisfy the unmet need. But to Julia's point earlier, the 88 is the number that we were required to create firm, realistic opportunities for development of affordable units. Transferring that forward to the 4th round, really all you have to do is look for changes. Are there any opportunities to develop new units that didn't exist in the 3rd round? If there are, you have to take those into account and they may generate a 4th round RDP. We don't believe there are here in Lambertville. That's subject to final confirmation, but it appears as though we used up all of our vacant land in the 3rd round. And the other thing I should say is you're not required to build affordable housing on the same properties that generated the obligation. You just have to have a plan that will provide those units somewhere. So some of the properties that went into the 3rd round RDP may still be vacant, but they've already been accounted for, so they won't be counted again in the 4th round, even if they are still vacant. We have subsumed that obligation into the 3rd round plan. Is it appropriate to say, I'm happy to take questions on that? If that was
Sure, if there's a question for Elena on
It's technical
that,
and a pain in the neck, but.
No, she explained it very well.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. And next we wanted to do a review of the timeline. So history wants a review.
I think Elaine's doing that, yes.
Yeah, all right. The new law that was passed in March set forth a timeline for every town to have to follow to comply with the requirements for 4th round compliance. Every town must have a 4th round housing plan adopted by their planning board by the end of June. Which doesn't sound like a big deal for one town, but when you have 28, it is a very big deal. So we need to worry about when the planning board can meet, when they can review the draft housing plan. It has to be on file 10 days before the public hearing, all those things. We have to have draft ordinances written if we are going to do that. We have to have a spending plan written for the trust fund. Short version is, I think at the meeting 2 meetings ago, Mayor, if I'm not mistaken, you were talking about the planning board public hearing on May 7th. And if that's not possible, May 21st, which means we need to have a draft of the housing plan ready for public review by the third week in April. The vacant land adjustment, I hope will be done either next week or the week after. It would be really helpful to have our plan for the fourth round done by the end of March at the latest and earlier if possible. That is a quick turnaround to know by the end of March that we're going to do overlay zoning on these properties, and we're going to have to write those zoning ordinances with setbacks and bulk standards and whatever they are, figure out how many units an overlay zone in each place would generate, all those things. So if we can have a plan finalized by the end of March, we in our office will have a draft housing plan written by the third week in April to put on file.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What does the planning board, it comes to us, what are we approving, what do we compare it to? Like the last meeting we had where it was the old high school site.
Yeah, it
Was
won't
it
be like that.
substantially consistent?
No,
with-
it won't be like that. It will be, here's our obligation. Here are the mechanisms we're proposing to meet that obligation. And it'll go into detail about the fact that it's unmet need and all that stuff. And here are the draft ordinances. And the planning board will look at that and say, yes, this is consistent with master plan. This is, it will be, because it is a master plan element, the planning board must adopt it. Now, the Fair Housing Act has an additional requirement, which is the governing body must endorse it. The new law does not require that to be done by the end of June. It'd be great if it were. The ordinances don't have to be adopted. You would review the ordinances and we can tweak them. They don't have to be adopted till March of next year.
Does Fair Share Housing have to be in agreement with this by then also? or-
Not, I bite your tongue.
Well, I'm trying to understand the process because that was part of the last.
So, as everybody is, maybe you don't know, but every town had to adopt a binding resolution by the end of January, stipulating to their fourth round obligation, either the DCA numbers or a different number if they could support that. So Lambertville has done that. We've stipulated to the DCA calculation of 39 units. Anybody who wants to challenge that, anybody who wants to say 39 is too low a number, you need to do more, has until the end of February to do that. We do not know of any challenges that have been filed yet, but I think Friday is going to be a very busy day. Fair Share would only get involved, I think, if there is a challenge. If we get through the end of February and there's no challenge, the number to which we stipulated is presumptively valid, right? Stop me when I'm wrong, because now I'm treading on Kelly's territory. The number we stipulated to is presumptively valid. So Fair Share doesn't have to be in the room at that point. They would only come in if something needs to be negotiated in terms of an obligation.
Can't see something where if we're accepting the number the state put out, that they would come in, to be honest.
Right, but
If we're asked for something lower,
so they're not gonna be involved in endorsing any plan we come up with eventually, like I thought they were in the third.
Well,
yes, this is all
so,
different.
I just wanna make
This is
sure,
a-
I wanna be clear on that.
Yes.
that's all.
It's a completely different process. So we have to file our plan by the end of June, and there is a second opportunity for somebody to object. So the first opportunity is now when people could object to the number.
Right,
And the second opportunity is between the end of June and the end of August, when somebody can object to the actual plan. And they can look and they can say, that site isn't ever going to generate that number of units. That's not realistic. These are, and I have a site that will. So that there is a second window of opportunity for challenge that is over at the end of August. If we get through that, we're good.
What was the date again where everything has to be to the planning board?
If
It's-
you're
it's-
having your public hearing on May 7th,
Correct.
it has to be on file for public review in Cindy's office 10 days prior. So we would do our very best to get you a draft for review prior to that, so that the one that went on file was pretty much the version that we get adopted.
I think Mike Oh, sorry. I think my question is related to Paul's. So I'm looking at the calendar and I see that there are the affordable housing actions or these meetings and so on interspersed with planning board meetings and city council meetings. And has this schedule been refined to take into account those deliverable dates, those, you know what I mean, those interactive deliverable dates? So that even though
Are
it
you
says,
looking at this? What are we looking at?
I'm looking at the timeline that was distributed to the committee.
Oh, okay.
That's Cindy's timeline.
Yeah, so,
So I just don't know, have those kind of deadlines been taken into account where all it says is planning board meeting, but there are delivery dates that are prior to the actual planning board meeting in here that need to be, you need to be mindful of. And I just don't know that they're all articulated in
they're
the timeline.
probably,
that
I
we're
mean,
looking
Cindy and I have talked about this just the other day, so.
So I took that and did refine.
Right.
What I did is I left the big master, and then there are different tabs, one for the affordable housing, for us to take a look at certain things. Then there's the planning board, the dates that they have to take action, and the dates primarily that Elaine's going to deliver the product. And then the governing body, what the governing body's actions, what they need to take. There's like tabs on the bottom, but it's still under review, so I haven't uploaded it yet.
And I think I kind of understand what you're driving at, and there's going to be inevitably some disconnect between our work and the deadlines, right?
Right,
So that's kind of what I'm driving at. So when Elaine talks about wanting to have everything by the end of March, I recognize that we only have 2 more meetings before the end of March, and the next meeting will probably be the one in which we can, you know, make the most progress so that Elaine can kind of use what we have in that meeting, because the meeting on the 26th is probably going to be too late for her to really, for us to deliver anything that's useful for her. So I understand, and some of it's just kind of the way we're rolling this out so simultaneously to the deadline. So we're, as I said in the first meeting, to some degree, for a little while, we're on parallel tracks, but we're not always going to be, you know, what we need to do here is not always going to line up with the deadlines that are in place before the end of June.
right, and my point is related to that, but also when it has a planning board meeting on here, and Paul's looking at, this is when the planning board has to consider it. That doesn't necessarily mean there's a deadline for this group or Elaine to get something done by that planning board meeting. There's a date in advance that they need the information for.
Yeah.
And so I just don't want us to not have that articulated somewhere and then get to a date and we're like, oh, it looked like on this, we're gonna make the deadline, but we're not because we forgot that it has to be delivered in advance. As long as somebody has their eyes on that.
We do, and
Yeah, I got
we
it.
haven't refined the schedule, and I will work with Cindy. and
But
Elaine
I certainly have my internal calendar with
Right.
all these deadlines for all 28 towns.
So by the next meeting, I will have articulated what the council and the planning board need to do relative to what our work is.
Yeah.
So
Most of
that
the work
everybody
is
on the.
planning board though, right?
What's that?
Most of the work is done by the planning
The
board,
public hearing is a planning board hearing, because
And
this is a
then
master
council.
plan element.
endorses after the fact.
And the planning board's professionals, the planner and the engineer need to be involved in this.
Well, certainly the planner, we would do a presentation. This is the
Well, yeah,
housing
yeah.
plan for Fort yes.
Does the engineer,
I would have, the engineer wouldn't typically look at this, would he?
I wouldn't think so.
I wouldn't think so.
No, no, I don't think so.
I have a process question that might end up becoming a substance question, which is, the last time we were together, you mentioned, when we talked about mechanisms, that one mechanism could be the areas in need of redevelopment, areas in need of rehabilitation. And you also mentioned that that's a fairly lengthy process to do that analysis, to make sure you've hit all the statutory requirements, what have you. So I guess my question is, given the timelines, is it realistic for us to even think that those are mechanisms at this point? Or can we use them?
Yes. I think the way we would approach that is to write draft ordinances to get through the June 30th deadline.
Mhm.
And then do the longer redevelopment process where we thought it was appropriate afterwards. Because as I said, those ordinances, and again, the redevelopment plans wouldn't have to be adopted till March of 2026.
Okay, great, thank you.
So, yeah,
What other bylaws?
I think that's a good, I think you raise a really good point there, and I appreciate that, because there are some potential opportunities for the governing body to look at areas that may have already been, like village apartments have already been declared redevelopment, and it's possible that the governing body might want to have a plan for that, right? And that could,
Yeah.
that could drive.
yeah, we may actually need, I don't know, I have to see whether we need a plan for that one area, just because we already have the designation. And do you know, we need a plan, we do a draft ordinance for a redevelopment area. Yes.
Well, the other possibility would be to have, and kind of.
Well,
one
I'm sorry, there's like a side, can I respond to the side?
Please,
thing?
yeah.
I appreciate that sentiment that we should do the plan to be careful, but I think that that kind of sentiment is what's gotten us over these years, where we've constantly been chasing the like, just to be safe, or we think we're gonna piss somebody off by doing it this way.
Well, I think you cover all your bases by redevelopment plan. You set out your standards, your variances, your characteristics of the development. I think a redevelopment plan is the way to go.
Yeah, my concern was more.
But
are
what
we-
time you
what's
can do draft.
required?
Yeah.
I think let's talk about both what's required and what's an ideal state.
Yeah, my concern is much
Right.
more, so we have the redevelopment designation for the village apartments.
Sure.
There's no plan yet. So my
And you want to
concern
put an
is,
overlay on it.
well, the question is, could we do a draft ordinance to get us through June 30th and then do the plan?
Oh, yes, but
Okay.
a plan will be going forward.
Oh, yeah.
You're gonna have
Oh,
a
for sure.
plan.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely, just not by June 30th.
agreed,
Okay.
yes.
One thing I keep hearing you mention is trying to get an overlay in place. I thought we had overlays in place in
We do.
a lot of areas in town, and maybe we need to, well, I mean, I thought,
We have two,
okay, what,
at present, three.
We have two
I'm
ordinances.
sorry, three, you're right.
One covers two properties.
okay, so an overlay, so what is it that we have that is basically 29, 165, 12 to the river?
So there are two versions of what's called a mandatory inclusionary set-aside ordinance, which essentially says, for the whole city, it says, anybody who gets a variance or a redevelopment plan and can build 5 or more new units must de-restrict 20%. And the flat part of the city, that doesn't even need a variance or redevelopment plan. That's any land use board approval. So that's all over the city, doesn't matter where. Not an overlay, it's a mandatory set aside ordinance. In addition, we have overlays on 3 properties.
So what does an overlay do then to that property? Let me ask that, because I don't understand.
Here, so I think if I may, correct me if I'm misinterpreting, the gist of Paul's question is getting at the mechanisms, and we've now spent 3 meetings talking about administrative detail and not the
Okay,
mechanisms.
you're right. So, yeah, one of the questions I was going to ask, once we passed the timeline was, has everybody really read through Elaine's memo about what mechanisms are?
I read that a while back, yes, that,
So
Yeah,
we all need to be conversant in that, and certainly if there are questions about any of these mechanisms, we could take a couple minutes and address them now.
until everybody else reads it too, but there's one.
It's hard. I have one question on the timeline, and I may just be missing something very basic. We're talking about getting this to the planning board May 7th, which is great if we can do it way earlier, but why are we pushing it when we could also go in the June meeting?
Well, I was prefer, personally, prefer, get it done sooner rather than later, to build in some contingencies. It's quite possible we're going to do it to the 24th. I'm totally fine with that, but I prefer to sort of get our ducks in a row sooner. It's just one less thing that we have to worry about. So it's a personal preference. If it happens later in the month, that's completely fine. But I just like the idea of, if possible, that we do it sooner.
To the degree then, to Michelle's point earlier, that we can avoid any of the inherent misalignment in our schedule and this timeline that we're trying to meet, this body should realign its schedule and add new meetings as possible to make sure that stuff doesn't go to the planning board without us having appropriate time to review and provide comment.
Okay, absolutely. So you'll make a note of that, right? So I don't forget exactly what you just said, but it's important. Yeah, and when we look at this, the timeline, if I'll make sure that as we look at the timeline, we're aligning it to this meeting schedule as closely as possible. And if there are gaps, we'll address it at the next meeting. So we'll really make sure, we'll send out a detailed timeline. I'll send out kind of what each body is going to be doing. Let's say body and this body versus the governing body. Right? So yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions on the timeline? So I have a few things here before we start to look at the draft list of properties. I wrote to Judge Miller and Frank Banish, and I forgot to tell you guys this today. I had a 2-minute phone conversation with Frank Banish yesterday. Yes, 2 minutes. It was super quick. Because he hadn't answered my email about the third and fourth round. So he asked me to write Judge Miller an email and set up a meeting for Councilman Lyde and myself, Judge Miller and Frank, to understand, I don't know the first thing about this, but the potential benefits of combining the third and fourth rounds. I'm not going to be able to speak to this at all tonight. I don't know anything about it, other than it's something that some municipalities are doing and see the benefit in. So I'll report back on that at the next meeting. I'll send it, maybe I can drop a memo. As soon as I meet with Judge Miller, I'll have a better sense of what that could possibly mean for us.
Well, one thing off the top of my head is, does it mean this, would it mean the same deadlines for the third round like June? I mean,
I'm absolutely not.
that's one,
I'm
yeah,
not-
I know, it's a question to be asked and understood.
And sorry, I don't know if I missed this. Were we asked to consider this, or is this something we're making an inquiry about?
It was brought up to me as something that we could consider. Some municipalities are doing it. I could not find any information on about it, about the process online.
No, there is no official process.
Right, so I have no idea what it is.
Yeah.
Other than one conversation, I think one email maybe that I had with Frank or somebody said that, some municipalities are considering this and we could consider it if we think it works to our advantage.
And that's why we really want to talk to Judge Miller, because Judge Miller, they've had meetings with the judges that handle affordable housing, and if this is something that other municipalities are doing, it would make sense that he would know about it. He's been managing more, I think he manages the most in the entire state, so.
Well, and he is also the head of the sort of adjudicating board that will hear challenges.
Yeah, so, we have the opportunity to talk to him. He says, look, this is what other municipalities are doing. We'll obviously look into it. They haven't had this issue before with the merging of the rounds, so there's no playbook for us to look at.
So stay tuned on that. So there's a draft list of the properties. I need to talk about Julia's work here a little bit over the last few days. And it's really impressive, and I'm grateful for her work in this. Elaine and Cindy and Julia compiled a list of all the properties that we wanted to consider for compliance with both the third and the fourth round. There's a map here with a list of I think most of them. And Julia's created a spreadsheet which lists the properties individually, the block and lot, potential mechanisms for third or fourth round, kind of history of the site with links. We'll release this to the public at some point on a regular basis, but it's going to be a living document. So we're going to be talking off this document tonight. We're going to be going through it, and I'm going to be talking about individual properties. And Julia's going to probably make some real-time changes as she gets information. What I'd like to say to the committee is that, if you think we're missing something, if something in your travels across the map of Lambertville or in your mind or on your walks, you see a property that's interesting or that strikes something in you, please let us know if it's not on the list, right? I don't think there's any property that we should consider all viable properties. And so So I thank Paul for, for already getting some wheels turning in his head. We'll talk about at least one of those ideas tonight. But this is the kind of thing that we should be thinking about, right? So I did not put the Legion on the list, although I'm well acquainted with this concept. I've had multiple conversations with them. So, and that's the same for the public too, right? So we list the map, take a look. If you think that there are places that we're not considering or that we've overlooked, we want to know about it. So to that extent, we really want to be engaged. So for those of you who have laptops up,
Julia, do we have the update? Is that in the folder?
It's in a folder. Just see what folder it's in.
it is in the property folder.
But now it's on the sheet of updating.
So for those of you who are on your computers, if you're in the Google, in the file, you go to the properties folder. And then the file on the right, the 250219 is to sites. That's what, this is gonna be our working document.
And while people are pulling stuff, I'll just say, I'd love to take credit for, really, I just made some edits. This is Elena and her team and you all putting lists on. So I just did some cleaning up and added some links.
Yeah, and I started with Cindy's work, so, yeah.
Well, thank you both. I know that Julia's being modest. It's good to be here. This week. So we're just gonna dive in unless there's any questions from anybody on the committee about anything in particular before we start with these. Okay. And I'll also say that on Monday, I sent out about 40 letters to property owners, pretty much everybody that's on this list, inviting them, and I'll put a copy of the letter in the file for everybody to take a look at. There was a letter addressed to each of these property owners. Many of them I know, so they were addressed personally, telling them that we're doing this very open and public process and having these open public conversations, and that your property is coming up for discussion. And I would like to talk to you about it at some point to see, the ways in which we can partner, if you're interested, and let you know that everything's under consideration. So that letter went out on Monday. I've already had 3 or 4 calls, setting up meetings, and as we go through the list, I will update everybody about kind of where we are on a particular property. So we'll start with number 1, Rego auctions. So this for all of the Rego, the various Rego sites.
Hold on, excuse me, Mayor. Can everyone see this except me?
Well,
Because I don't think everyone has access to the document yet.
I'm trying to.
Sorry, it's a little hard to
That's
follow
okay.
the list if we don't all have it.
Yeah. So,
Cindy can send it out to everybody.
Anyone with the link should be able to see it.
Yeah, so if you go to the shared drive where the other documents are, then go into the properties folder.
I can't access any of it.
I'll Google, I got
You got it.
Yeah.
Okay, wait, my invitation has been removed. She's trying to get me connected. If I'm the only one, keep going and.
well, you're also going to meet in a few minutes, right?
Yeah. Well, we'll keep going.
Okay. All right, so the Rego auction properties, so there's 3 of them. I had a conversation with David Rego, not a conversation, we had an email exchange a couple days ago. I'm meeting him on Friday. So I have the meeting set up with David Rego. I'll report back. So for those of you out here in the audience, the Rego properties are at 333 North Main Street,
199
245.
George,
What's that?
199 George.
Yeah, and 245 North Main. So we have those listed as potential, in terms of the column that says, what may be the best mechanism. This is a potential 4th round mechanism, inclusionary overlay. And as we're going through this, obviously, we're going to be talking about unmet need, but we're also going to be thinking about those 3rd round RDPs, right? So we're going to be thinking about both of these as we move forward. So that's the update there. Village apartments, there is no current update. The notes in the document.
CVS lots.
I'm sorry.
CVS lots.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that. CVS lot, there are 2 lots here, 1004, lot 1 and 2, Cherry Street, 11365 Cherry Street. I have sent a letter. I've not heard back from them. All we know in our notes, we have a question about whether the CVS lease is up in 2026. And that would be an inclusionary overlay. Village apartments, so just in the notes here, we note that the property was severely damaged during Ida. The city completed an area in need of redevelopment study in January 2022 and designated it as an area in redevelopment with condemnation in March 2022. However, there's been no redevelopment plan that's been adopted. And there's just a note that flood rules require greater elevations, and any development here would be taller and denser than the previous use. It's a constrained site, and it's going to be, when it is redeveloped, it's going to be it's going to look quite different. The residential unit for Kathy Begg and Barbara Klein is adjacent to that. It's a pretty good sized lot. It's more than half an acre. And I know that there were some conversations about that in the past. I've not spoken to them, but that is something that we'll want to consider. The Boston Farm, so I have to give some news on this. We are looking at this as a potential site for 6 Habitat for Humanity homes. I've been up there a couple of times. Most recently, I was up there Tuesday with the city engineer, measuring the potential for a road up to the back of the property. And met with Chief Barlow to make sure that the fire department wouldn't have any concerns about the way that the houses would be configured, because there's no turnaround up there. So we're going to continue to work, and we did, the city council did meet with the executive director of Habitat for Humanity this past council meeting. So we're going to continue to move forward, exploring that as an option, and I feel pretty good about that. Canal Studios, so we have 3, let's see, we have more than, the Maxwell Assets owns several properties in the north end, northern part of town. I had a text exchange with Dan Popkin today, the owner of those properties. He's very interested in having a conversation about redevelopment for all of those properties. So I will follow up once I have a meeting with him. Yes.
Yeah.
So it's the Canal Studios, it's the Canal yada yada, and it's the he's got 3 buildings.
He is the church.
The church, yeah.
The
So
church on Main Street just is not on this list currently.
Correct.
So nobody gets confused and looks for it.
yeah. So that's promising. Diamond Silver Building, I have not had any contact with Mr. DeSalvi about that. But that would be potentially an inclusionary overlay, that site. The Spokesworks Building, so this is where Union Chill is, a large building. There are 4 associated lots there. Let's see the right one. 5 associated lots
Wait,
there.
I'm sorry, I will stop interrupting you, but if you tell me no, is your intention to go through every line here or not?
Sure.
Okay, so we skipped Nice Lumber.
Oh gosh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and then Basil Bandwagon is owned by Canal Properties. Is that a Jenny Popkin entity?
It is, yeah. I'm sorry, I don't know how I'm just kind of skipping over that. So Nice Lumber, I have had an initial conversation with Nice Lumber, and that's going to be a follow-up conversation. That would be an inclusionary overlay. So the OL Cow is part of Nice. Basil Bandwagon is part of the Canal Properties, the Jenny Popkins properties. So we just talked about the Diamond Silver, the Rago auction, Annex Gallery we talked about. So the Spokesworks Building, 5 total lots there. I've not had any, not spoken to that property owner yet. Be mindful of the letters just went out on Friday, on Monday, so we've got a little bit of time there. East Lumber I've mentioned, Rago we've mentioned. South 100 Apartments, so.
Who's 8 enterprises?
That's the storage unit that is behind Rago on George Street, that access, there's a garage door
Yeah, behind my house.
by Elm.
What?
Yeah, behind my house, used to be like near the old bowling alley.
Is this the old Lambertville Ceramic?
No.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. It's right behind my house.
I know you are.
So South 100 Apartments, not everybody probably knows where that is. It's the apartment complex that is on the corner of Perry and North Main. I think it's, how many units is it, Cindy? I forget.
I believe
12?
it's 14.
14. So just in the notes here, it's a HUD agreement. Well, we looked at the HUD agreement has expired and we would need, we would talk to the board about potential to do something there. And that would be just yet.
That's age restricted, correct?
It's not age restricted. No.
Do we know that for a fact? That it's not age
I
restricted?
thought it was.
I thought it was too.
I don't believe it's age restricted.
It is.
No, it's been a while since I've looked at the expired agreement, but that agreement's expired. I know that the practice is that they've had people with disabilities living there, that are self-sufficient. So they may have some seniors, but it's a.
But if the agreement's expired, it can going forward be something entirely different.
Yes, we will have more news on that. I am having a quick conversation with the board member who runs that today. And I will be meeting him probably on Friday to have a discussion.
We should probably, for people who don't know, was developed and is operated by a nonprofit entity that has a board, no staff. But the board has dwindled to a very small number of folks. And so it's functioning, but it does not have a robust operating management system. company.
Yes.
Well, to get someone with authority to make the change might be difficult with the board situation too. So when we look at reasonable opportunities, that might be something that we have to look at. We might have a great idea, but you know, a lot of those board members might be deceased, we're gonna have to track down.
Right. It's a complicated
Process.
Yeah, I've had the city attorney take a look at the documents and it's complicated. But I expect to have more information on that by the time we begin. And that would be slated as a potential inclusionary overlay or possibly redevelopment. The next one on the list is 118 North Union Street. Mr. John Munis, who said hello to you. I talked to him today. He had an accessory dwelling unit that was built some years ago and having, I think, a deed restriction that's now expired. He is not interested in renewing that deed restriction. No, not interested. So we could just change that to a no for no, probably a no forever, it sounded like. Next is the Methodist Church at 108 North Union Street.
Did you skip one? I think you can do it.
What's that?
Did you skip line 16?
Yeah, very hard.
Oops, sorry, once more, thanks for catching me. Residential attached unit at 152 York Street, Mary Carter. There's a question about whether Habitat could purchase and deed restrict it.
Do you know its current status?
I do not. I tried to look. It's not listed for sheriff's sale anymore, but it's still in Mary T. Carter's name.
And that could be possibly a market tool for Habitat. Methodist Church, Centenary Methodist Church. It's noted here that it's possibly under contract. When did we put that in?
I think that was information that.
Okay.
They're in, I went and saw it, they're in negotiation.
Okay.
That's what I was told, they're in negotiation with at least one potential buyer.
Okay.
And yeah, the retrofit for residential use would be a very heavy lift,
Yeah.
time and money wise.
Yeah. I've had a couple of developers stop in and ask me about that.
Yeah.
Church on the good luck. What's that?
Unless I missed it. Just skip over.
No, I
Right,
just,
Avenue.
why don't I have something on the sheet?
Because you asked us to hold off on it.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, we're not talking about that.
Okay,
tonight.
okay,
Yeah. I know the property owner, and they want us to just
okay.
hold on for just a little bit.
Sorry.
That's okay, thanks for asking.
Can we use the Munis and church as options, just for discussion? Like right now, we have the Munis on this list, we have it as a potential renewed deed restriction. We don't know, he doesn't want to, we can't force private property owner to do that. So we could leave it on here and just say there's no potential fourth round mechanism.
Yes,
And for church, we say potentially inclusionary overlay, which I guess we could leave on, but given the difficulty of redeveloping that for residential, it may not be a likely rehab, so it may not be something we want to think about for the fourth round. We can keep it on the list, but it's probably not really an option for fourth round.
I think that's good, thanks for.
I think
Is
if
there
two
a way
different people look at the list, they're gonna be asked about that, and they see the reasons why they're saying, well, yeah, we considered it, and, that's why we're not counting
Right.
that.
Yeah, that's what we wanted to achieve with this, is something that keeps the record of the discussion, so we can stop having the same conversation over and over again, people just check it out.
I think it's great.
Number 19 is Coriel's Ferry Landing Apartments. There's some potential for deed restricting one or two apartments in terms of rehabilitation funds. There's a challenge with a limited emergency egress. This would be a market to affordable.
Did we find out how many units are in there total? Do we know that?
I do not.
I tried to look it up, and I couldn't find
Yeah,
it.
you
Maybe the-
Can you just write Mr. Fortwright a note?
Just the one right along the river there.
Yes.
Yeah. Finkel's, the former Finkel's site. So for each of these lots, it's block 1022, lot 10, 11, 12, block 1035, block 27. I have met with the owner of this property about a month ago, and they intend to go directly to the planning board with their plans. They're not asking for any relief. They're planning on doing things that are completely allowed in the central business district. And there was no expression of any interest in providing any kind of housing at the site. So let's keep it on the list, but I think that it's pretty clear that they're planning to move forward with their plans.
And so one, just for the public's knowledge, when the mayor mentioned that in context of this list, I said, well, let's keep it on. People are gonna wonder, why aren't you putting an overlay, especially given that it's going to be developed. But the reality of the zoning is that they're going as of right, and they don't, as of right, meaning they're gonna build something that is allowed by current zoning. We could put an overlay on it. They don't have to use it, but it doesn't serve, it's not going to serve us well in this round. So we may leave it on the list, and we could put an overlay someday, but if it's not gonna develop, it's not gonna generate a realistic development potential, it doesn't help us in our affordable housing. So, and I'm saying this for the record, that it's not that we didn't consider it, it's not that we're not putting overlays where we should, it's that it doesn't produce a realistic opportunity for affordable housing given their current plans.
I think it's related to the question also that comes up when you look at the properties that have been redeveloped here over time by developers, private property owners that have developed the properties. The question has come up, well, why did they develop it that way without a requirement to include affordable housing? How are they kind of getting away with that? But if they're doing it in accordance with zoning, there's nothing that the city can do. Is that correct? There's nothing that the city can do to require them to make any or all of those units
It would be a
affordable
taking.
housing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So this comes up over and over again, and I think in the FAQs, I don't know if it's an appropriate place, but at least somebody needs to be
That's a good.
well-versed in explaining this, because the optic on it is not a great one, right? They seem to be kind of a little bit in conflict. There's a real reason for it. But if you're not listening to this conversation, you're not reading these minutes, you missed a meeting where it was discussed. Your perception is going to perpetuate that there's an opportunity that the city lost to build affordable housing, when in fact it wasn't an option because it was owned by a private property owner that was playing by the rules, and there was no option. So I think there's an opportunity to be informative to the public in this regard.
Yeah, we'll add an FAQ question about that for everyone to review.
On this point, though, can I ask a question? Of course, you're right that if they're doing something as of right under zoning, they can do it. But that's where the area in need of redevelopment or rehabilitation comes in, right? Because at least you can create incentives for them to do something else. So you can't force them to do something else. But with an area in need, you can create an incentive. You can do a tax break or something like that. So that's something else I think to think about in this context, right? So
I think that's a good reason for peace, because obviously we're not doing anything now. But in the future, that property, I think this property owner for this property had plans when he bought it. So I think that makes sense to, put it on the list, but tell people why we're not, but thinking about other property.
Yes.
Piece where they have no plans now, but in the future, there could be an opportunity there, absolutely.
And what would have to happen? What would have to, who would need to take action and what kind of action in order to create that, to codify that kind of
And
incentive?
what's the cost? So it's
Right.
not inexpensive to create a redevelopment plan, if we
Right.
know this owner is going forward. That's one thing, we may not do, go to the expense, but for something that may develop 15 years down the
Right.
road, it
There's no point in it.
might be worth it for later, yeah, okay, well, try to capture that in an FAQ and Sean can keep me honest.
And I'll just add one other thing, in terms of why was it allowed to develop and no affordable housing came out of it? The set aside requires at least 5 new units before one of them has to be deed restricted. If somebody builds 4, they're not required to provide an affordable unit, but they are required to pay a development fee into the trust fund.
So
we
have they
had,
done that?
excuse me,
Yes,
They've done that.
yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
oh, sure.
Every new house that's built, it pays into the trust fund.
Yeah.
So I don't remember the exact number, but when I started, I think the trust fund was about $86,000 and it's close to 300 now.
Yeah, but well over 2, yes, I think
Yeah.
so. I have to
Yeah,
double check,
so
yeah.
I think there've been 13 houses built in the last couple of years. So a percentage of the assessed value goes directly into the trust fund. And that money's collected before the CO is issued. So, and that's helpful. And it's also good for people to remember, I think, there are instances where it's not possible to do 5 houses or 4 houses. But even in those instances, they're still putting in something, right, of value for us to work with. There are 3 properties next to each other in the central business district, and they're owned by 3 different property owners. Peace Pies, Peterson Gallery, and Brennick's. These are all on the street. 3 different owners, fairly small buildings. We already have the mandatory set aside ordinance.
Just sold.
Yeah. Yeah.
The question here is similar to what we were just getting at, which is that we already have a citywide overlay, so if somebody were gonna develop, they'd have to abide by that. These are, so now I'm not talking about rules, I'm talking about my personal opinion here. These are buildings that are small and cute and contribute to the character of our downtown, and so any kind of overlay we would do would have to call for or allow much grander development. That may not be something that the city wants to encourage in that location. So we have to think about the opportunity of overlays versus how does this align with our master plan and our goals for various neighborhoods?
Right.
The only option here is to go up.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Well, and
But it's come on down.
you lose this sense of scale there. I mean, and here's just a counterpoint to that. So if you look at Giuseppe's on the corner there, that's basically a 1-story building, and you have 4-story building across the street, that might be a place where you might consider going up a couple
We
of
should add that
floors.
on here.
Yeah, that's one of the.
Well, but the same question would apply though. What is the incentive that we would offer that isn't already there?
Right.
Built up.
To go on? Because that's why these buildings are on, is they're all 1-story buildings next to multi-story buildings.
Well, I found it in my travels over the last 3 years, and certainly in working with one property owner in particular who was really eager, and with whom I spent the better part of 6 months trying to get a market to affordable. This is a person who can afford it and wanted to do it, and in the end, I've said this before, it didn't work out for a lot of different reasons. The incentives, taxes or just plain old cash out of the trust fund sometimes just are not. When you look at the value of real estate in the city and kind of we're running into some problems in terms of like a mechanism like that, where it may become less effective just because of general market factors.
I think you have to look at a long-term investor who's gonna say they can do affordable for now, and when it's done, like this other person, they're taking it off, and that's the type of person you would find.
But yeah, the argument is if you add a story of apartments, you have a revenue stream you did not have. So it's just a question of, with any development,
Right.
like the time over which that pencils out.
I think that Giuseppe's property, I mean, that actually is a really good option for building up there.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, I've always said that.
a really good idea.
Well, and these are not, and I will not raise this again, but these are not just affordable housing questions. This is stuff we should be considering for our next reexamination report for our master plan. What kind of density do we want to see and where, so we can stop fighting about it on these, affordable housing or whatever other issue. Let's set a direction that adds density in certain places where we think it makes sense. So this is, I think, a useful process for multiple reasons.
All right, moving on, the barber shop there, also, it's kind of the same story, right? The Jesus School, one of my personal favorites. It's a fantastic building. My son went to the Jesus School, and it's a wonderful place. I definitely, we haven't talked to St. John's about that, but I think it's a very interesting question, and that would be a foreground inclusionary possibility.
Have you met with?
I have not. The letter to diocese, I know I've sent a letter to Father Robert, and I'll reach out sometime soon. I would also, this is another thing, I'm just gonna ask this to throw it on the list. I mentioned to Cindy, I don't know, maybe a little bit nowhere, but why aren't we considering the North Union Street parking lot? We own that property. Right? And parking's important, but housing's important as well. So,
Do we own the property at the top of Coriel Street too,
Oriole Street.
by the statements?
Parking lot?
Yeah, that's
On North
the
Franklin?
extension of, that's still Oriole Street.
It's still Coriel Street?
Yeah, it's still a dedicated roadway. Right, it's still dedicated.
It is, it's a
I think
road
your point about the parking lot is a good one. It absolutely should be on the list. It meets all the requirements we're talking about, and I think we color code it depending on, how much of an opportunity we think is there. Yeah, I think it should go on there.
Yeah, so these are the kinds of things I want you guys thinking about as well, right? I mean, I just thought of the parking lot 2 days ago. The parking lot, we own it, right? We can do what we want at the parking lot. All right, moving on. Wells Fargo Bank. So it's in the process of being sold. I talk to the broker on a regular basis. I kind of know what's happening with it. I definitely think it's a candidate for an inclusionary overlay.
High level list. I would put that up higher on the list because it hasn't sold. You might get someone out there. I mean, that would be something where I think we should move a little bit faster because it might get somebody more interested in that property if there's any other incentives for them.
Possibly, yeah.
And the flip side is the difficulty of repurchasing that for housing, and we want to see that building
Yeah,
come
there's
down.
a parking lot.
There's parking you could add in the parking lot.
There's more parking there than there's building.
Yeah.
So. If we like the parking, but someone could subdivide that and build something on the parking lot.
And you have a couple chessboards right on the street. For recreation. So, yes.
I'd like to be able to, how many people in the public want to speak tonight? I need to kind of accommodate the time. We typically end at 8:30. Okay. All right, so it looks like we just have one person, so we can go on.
Do we have anyone online, Cindy?
We have,
Thank you for asking.
four people online, but no one with the hand raised.
Residential apartment at 6 Lily Street, the city, the library. So we talked about this at the council meeting, last council meeting. All the council members have gone on record as saying they support an ordinance to deed restrict the library apartment. So I've instructed the city attorney to begin drafting the ordinance to deed restrict that apartment. That would be a family apartment, 30 or 40 years, 40 years. So we own that, we should pull the trigger on it. Next is multifamily townhouse at 226 Main Street. This is owned by Natalie Rivera. This is a third round mechanism. It's an accessory apartment with a 10-year deed restriction. It's currently vacant and the building may be for sale. It's a too affordable mechanism that's already kind of happened. Okay, so
It has, but it's my understanding that there's 2 apartments there. One of them is deed restricted and the other one might be vacant. And I'm not sure. We really need to talk to Miss Rivera.
okay. We don't know. Put it on my calendar.
I will.
2 units there, one is still deed restricted,
Only one is deed
Only one,
restricted.
only one. She
Yeah.
created an accessory apartment.
but it's expired next.
Nope.
No.
No,
So the question is, would they extend?
correct.
So another property that's not on here, Julia, is 75 South Main Street. The approval for the accessory apartment.
Right. Did he extend? Did he
It
get
did
an extension?
extend,
He did.
yeah, and our last conversation was that he's planning on moving forward with construction.
Okay.
So that will be an accessory, so we list 75 as a in progress, market,
Accessory apartment.
Accessory dwelling.
Councilman Stegman had thought about a property near there too, right up along Eli Field where all those garages are there, that border there. I think they belong to that residential house it's on North Main, sorry. So by the school,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
going how it goes all the way back to Franklin.
We can talk about that. I talked to him about that. I haven't looked at the tax maps yet.
Okay.
So, Julia, if you want to make a note, and the North Franklin Street, I'll look into that.
And the reason why I was bringing that up is the city owns that lot too next to it.
Well, we do. Yeah, we do. And
Isn't that a flood zone in there?
it's not in a flood zone, but it's problematic just in terms of
Get that in.
impervious surface and the DNR Canal Commission. So I'm happy to look into it and happy to put it on the list. So the Parks Place rides and auto maintenance at 5 Route 165, the south end, right? That's owned by Hood Floors.
That's correct.
That could be considered for inclusion in overlay. Valparaiso's complex, also could be an inclusionary overlay, it's a flood zone. But basements did flood during Ida. Neverville Station, 3 lots here, 2 Station 411 Bridge Street, 9 Bridge Street. This would be potentially an inclusionary overlay. The city has had conversations a couple of years ago with the owners of the station who wanted to undertake a fairly significant project there, and that conversation did not end up going anywhere. Beyond kind of some initial meetings.
I assume that all those lots include the stuff that's in the back, because they've done a lot of work back there and clearing out an area that before was overgrown and everything. And it's like they got plans for something back there.
Yeah, they plans that they shared with me at a recent meeting. So, yeah. I don't
They
know.
were working on a storage issue for garbage,
Okay.
so I don't know. That's part of it.
I did meet with the owner of the property just a couple of weeks ago. I don't expect that at this time, I think that it's fair game for an inclusionary overlay. I think it's actually a great place to put an inclusionary overlay, for sure. It's a big lot. But imminently, any kind of imminent activity there is good. All right, winding down. The commercial building at 77 South Union Street. So this is the building that's across from Corvallis Park. Where the karate studio used to be, and there's a salon there, and where Hobby used to be. We're going to put this in as an inclusionary overlay. It's not a very big building. It's 50 feet wide. Anyway, it's 34 feet across at South Union Street, and the lot depth is 50 feet. And I don't know how long it is. It's probably up to 20.
Yeah, I didn't measure that, but we had talked about the possibility of could townhouses go there? And the answer is probably no. The lot is just not deep enough from Mount Hope Street.
Yeah,
So it would be a question of apartments over.
right.
Tall.
Right.
That's an opportunity for.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and there's another place where in my own opinion, that would be a good place to go up. You're right across from the park.
Yeah.
Right, and you've got, the houses across the way, which are 3 stories, pretty tall profiles. So,
And it may not yield a lot of units, but if we start chipping away at this
Right.
and we spread them throughout the community, then we meet the spirit of the law and people don't feel like they're in a complex that's just for affordable housing. I just think it makes for a beautiful neighborhood.
Yeah, and we set the stage for back to my proactive comment, this is what do we want to see in the future? We're putting that out there, we're making it public and declaring it.
Our next space is the South Side Laundromat, form and matter, the store there that used to be the bike shop, 1699 South Main Street. This would be potential for an inclusionary overlay. Riverwalk, 199 South Main. Big buildings, big brick buildings. What's the name of it? The new cannabis. We just.
Belief.
What is it? Belief, yes, Belief Cannabis, moving into, to that building. But it's a big building and, I've had numerous conversations with Mr. Albert about it and I expect to have another good conversation with him about it. And the beautiful mill building is a fabulous building.
Well, law departments would be so great.
Wouldn't they be? Little Haven Group Home up on College Hill, so it's on Douglas, Lincoln Avenue. It's 100% affordable, supportive group home, third round compliance mechanism. I did have a message from the owner today, and I think Councilman Lai did as well, so she's interested in having a conversation with the city.
And that might be another opportunity for an area in need of redevelopment too, because there's a lot of land there.
You get an argument about taking that building, and then have to go around.
I mean,
Yeah, no, I know.
and it's not, I mean, it's in, they have really tried to maintain that, but it's been very hard.
Yeah.
Before, it was like gutted and made into all these rooms too, so it's an unusual property.
But it's a handsome building for sure. I've lived on the inside.
Is there water there? They're not on a well, are they? They're septic.
But now it's all, I don't, I can't say for sure.
Yeah, I think they're on well.
I think they might be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet you they are.
Yeah.
So that is largely it. We also have on the list, these are, we have a couple of Habitat for Humanity houses on Belvedere, and then two on York Street. The one on York Street, interestingly, I just was part of a podcast last Sunday with 800 county mayors about affordable housing. It was almost a 2-hour conversation. With 8 mayors about the challenges in our different communities. And the mayor of Union Township reminded me that these two Habitat houses from York Street were actually back in the day when you could trade from municipality to municipality, that those were Union Township credits.
Not
where
these two, but two others. These are ours. These 4 of them are Lambertville's.
two of them in Lambertville were from Union Township.
We have 8 total.
Okay, all right,
We have 8. 4 are definitely ours, and then 2 were from other towns.
got it. Heritage Village is also noted here. This is, I start talking about this in the 3rd and 4th round, so.
And people may choose to not like the approach here, but what this currently reflects is things we're considering for the 4th round, plus the stuff that was in the 3rd round, so that it's just in one place, and we can stop saying, did we or did we not do that overlay? Like, it's here, we did it, and then right now, it's not very elegant, and we'll come up with some better, more elegant way to show the sites that have been discussed, and there's notes about them, but they're not in any round, they're just here on the list. Right now, they're struck through, whatever.
Crossed out.
They're crossed out for now, but that won't stay.
Did I miss it? There were 2 places that I thought might be on there, the Otaya building, especially the part in the back there that's.
That has an approved zoning board application that was, I think it was approved going to the meeting. I think it was in 2022 or 2023. And it was an expansion of the restaurant and 4 apartments, luxury apartments on the 2nd and 3rd floors. I have no idea what's happening with that site.
Yeah,
We closed it down. Okay.
another one is on Swan Street, that building that's, if you're walking, down towards the canal from South Union, you go past the parking lot of anyway, you go past there and then there's Swan, thank you. Yeah, it's on Swan. You keep going and right there in that first row of houses, there's a place
that is dilapidated, nobody's living in there, you know, the windows propped open this high, it's always dark at one time. Is there
Is it right across from Wilson Street?
pretty much so,
Yeah,
yeah.
so that's also been approved as a tear down. I don't know where the application stands. It was actually in the planning board recently, right? I wasn't able, I had to recuse myself.
Yeah, that's been approved.
It's been approved, so, two townhouses there.
Yeah, that, whatever that building is,
Yeah.
they've got the approval.
Were you with the putting the houses, raising them up? The new townhouses?
Yes, yeah. Let's just finish up the list if we can, because we're quite near the end. So, we know the Habitat, noted Heritage Village, the Lambertville High School redevelopment area. Obviously, everybody's probably familiar with that and where we are. In the notes, there are links to various meeting documents and important documents there. Lambertville Police Station, this is an area in need of redevelopment. This is one component of our third round that is incomplete. So, that's happening now. And then our three overlays, the Corboy property at 2 Rock Road West, the Bird property at 255 Brunswick Avenue, and the Trent Cracker Factory over on Lambert Lane.
And I was asked at the last meeting which buildings that overlay covers, and it is all of the buildings, including your former office.
Two things.
One question, going back to Wells Fargo.
Yeah.
Is Wells Fargo Bank, the old building, is that on the historic register?
It's not on the historic register, it's in the historic district, right? Yeah, there's only, I think, 2 buildings that are on the historic register in the town. I think it's, I forget which ones they are, Lambert House.
And, is Marshall House on?
I
The
don't,
Marshall House,
I don't know that it is.
I think the Marshall House is, but then also we have one, we have a house on North Union Street. Brunings, is their house, because they were,
Really?
yeah, they actually were on the historic, license
license
plate.
plate.
It's still on the
Yeah.
license plate, yeah. So yeah, it's not listed.
What about the property right next door? The property right next door that's.
Dilapidated.
Yeah.
That's what I was talking about. It don't tie up.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, yeah, let's throw it on. I don't know what the address is.
I'll figure it out.
Yeah,
But
doesn't look
there's
like
one
they've
that
done
says
anything.
25.
No, that might have been since.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's abandoned
It's
property,
not on the
rehabilitation act opportunities and some of the stuff.
I would think so, but it's in
What about the gas station across?
The gas station, we can put it on, that is going to be, you're talking about the one in the Port of Quarry?
Yeah.
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 That's that's in limbo at the moment. We can put it on there, but,
It's obviously got environmental.
yeah, there's,
remediation.
there are concerns, I've had that construction code just as well. There's no immediate environmental concerns, but there's some, something going on with the DEP and with the owner and with just property maintenance.
Yeah.
It's one of those kind of.
So there's
depends
no
on
immediate
sites.
environmental
What's that?
concerns? So there's no immediate environmental concerns?
That's correct.
Fascinating.
We just have a couple of minutes before we go to public comment. So Paul sent an email out to everybody. First of all, I just need to remind people that if you send emails to the group, you have a blind copy of everybody, please.
Why do you like the blind copy, everyone?
Because you don't want to risk an open public meeting and have a forum.
But
So if you copy everybody and somebody responds to everybody, you just triggered it as a public meeting.
so the one directional information is what we're trying to achieve.
Correct.
Yes.
The most annoying thing.
So, Julia, I would ask you to add the Legion onto the list. So, Paul mentioned in some conversations with Bob Miller at the Legion. I've also had 3 or 4 conversations. I've actually talked to somebody at Sustainable Veteran Housing about this. I think it's a great project to take a look at. And, you know, also helps in terms of I voice those, you know, funding is going to be issued for that project. It's also really one of the lowest elevations in the city. I think it's definitely worth putting on the list, and talking about. And then, I have no objection to Norwest Count coming in on the 10th, and doing a short presentation, as long as we're not, it's not sort of getting in the way of, you know, I don't know what we're going to be doing next time, but about sort of their involvement and kind of how we might discuss. So, I will say that there, you know, now that we've kind of begun this process, I love all the ideas that I'm getting a lot of ideas and having a lot of conversations about things. And, you know, we've talked about them, we put them on the list. A lot of them are just going to be, you know, not viable pretty much right out the gate. But I like the idea that we're talking about them, and the small ideas become big things. So, are there any final comments from the council before I go to the public participation?
I just have one request for an agenda item for our next meeting, and would be happy to work with Elaine and Cindy on this, or whomever else, just to make it not super long. I'd like to revisit the third round and be very clear and have shared language about what we have to solve for. I think what we went through during the third round, like, caused trauma for all of us, and just getting very clear. We did this, we did that, we did the other thing. We have to fix this, we want to change that if it's possible, because I don't think we're on the same page with that.
Yeah, I think we just need to be clear about what the number is. I mean, this is a really tricky thing to be talking about. And so, you know, we may need to have a couple of offline conversations about it. Just to be clear, and Kelly, you know, you could weigh in. I mean, there's some, you know, we're walking a fine line in terms of some legal issues here, and I'm reluctant to commit the city to a court, or this committee to a course of action that may send a message legally about something else, right? So I'm really sensitive to this, and I'm well aware, acutely aware of what we're facing, and we can have a conversation with Kelly about this, and decide whether it's advisable to pick a number that's different from a different number. If you know
Well,
what I
it doesn't
mean.
even have to be a number, just what we ended up with in the third round is unusual in certain ways, the way the police site ended up being discussed. Anyway, I'd like to find an appropriate way that doesn't get us in any hot water to have that conversation and make sure we have shared language for that moving forward.
Done. We'll do that. Okay, if there's any member of the public, feel free to just state your name and.
Sure. Jeff Fiddle, 33 Wilson Street. A couple of points. You mentioned about combining 3 and 4, given the fact that we have objectors coming in, filing. I think it's something you should very seriously look at, especially there's language in A4 in 2 sections, I can send them to anybody if you want, that says if you've been certified in round 3, which we are, even though we have a complaint, you can still move without going to court. And there's 2 sections for it. So, because if we don't do that, I mean, I'm really concerned. And again, I'm glad everybody's here together and trying to come up with a plan and look at different sites, but they're coming in soon. And the 6th is when we have to file, you know, have our briefs ready. And they're coming in with a multi-criminal lawsuit. I mean, I've been through it before in other communities. And once they come in to gain intervener status, their intervener status is a multi-criminal lawsuit. And they're going to come guns a-blazing and full speed ahead to try to undercut anything you're doing. So you really have to get your ducks in a row very quickly and have an alternative plan and look at the sections in A4 that allow you to move things if you don't think it's viable, because they haven't gotten any approval, they haven't gotten the ground yet. It does give you that opportunity. So I think we need to make a legal defense that way, as well as trying to keep them from intervening, which may be tough at this late date because we don't have an alternative plan. We don't have reports saying why the hill is inappropriate. So that's my first piece. And I guess the other part of it is, as you're having all these different places, you got to figure out approximately how many units can go where. what's reasonable, how quickly you can do an overlay zone, because again, if we're gonna be playing defense on a builder's remedy lawsuit, we better also be playing offense, because that's kind of the best defense, so you gotta get that stuff done. And I have a question for Cindy. There's a property somebody told me about, people have been coming up to me, and I don't really know some of these places up on the hill, but somebody named Roy Meyer has a couple of acres. Off of
He
518.
does, he does.
I heard somebody said he's interested in selling, and
Okay.
he's got like 2 to 3 acres. Which may not be a lot, but again, if he's willing to sell, and you can put a few units there. And then the other point I'll make on zoning, though, it may not be a lot of time, but up until they actually file at the planning board, you can change your zoning if you want to make it something mixed use and require affordable housing.
You're talking about Finkel's?
Well, Finkel or anywhere else, but I'm just using, it could also be with, whatever happens with the bank as well. Though I heard there's some trouble with the building, but I don't know, it shouldn't be here, that's why it hasn't gone through yet. But you do have that opportunity. One time you could even, change the zoning in the middle of the planning board hearing, but that was a law that passed a few years ago to block that. So, you've got a lot on your plate, but the quicker you can move and to get things in a row, the better off we're gonna be, because I've been through a builder's remedy challenge in a couple of towns, and they can take a lot of years and a lot of work and a lot of money. One other thing I was thinking about when you were talking about the short buildings. And also we have buildings in the central business district that are, I don't know if they have any rentals above the stores, and some of them do, some of them don't. But I know Bloomingdale years ago, when they had a builder's remedy lawsuit, and they were trying to save a piece of land up on Federal Hill, which is a historic area. And they came up with a plan to do incentives and other things to convert the second floors and third floors of shops on Main Street, on their Main Street, Hamburg Turnpike, into affordable units. So it may be something to think about as well.
I don't want to speak for Michelle, but that is something that she has, or going to anyway, obviously, that issue is something she has raised. It's something we might want to find a way to look into, and getting to understand the status, like the number of units, the status, the condition, on Union and Church in particular. There are probably other spots we could look at, but that may be a
Yeah, I had a friend of
worthwhile
mine who used
exercise.
to rent an apartment above where the cheese shop is back in the 70s. But that's something, and Bloomingdale actually was able to stave off a building challenge by doing that as an option.
Anyone else?
Sandy Hannon, 249 South Franklin. There is an old carriage barn that's on Church. And nobody knows that it's there. It's
I know all about it.
I know it's there.
And is it used for anything? Because it's been sitting there.
It's sold.
It's
It's
sold,
sold and.
but it's just sitting there.
Yes, that's right.
There's nothing going on. I don't
Correct.
know if there's an option.
There's a
there.
structural issue with part of it where it's like supported by the one wall there. It's a kind of unusual spot back there. And there's also an issue of access too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it has
They have kind of
access.
a little parking
But
area.
the problem with the building, I have a property that backs up against that
Who owns
building.
the access?
The building is the property line.
Where the volunteers.
On like 3 sides of it, so.
That's
That would be a second.
And then on Fine, I guess, the liquor store that's right here on Union. It used to be they didn't use that top floor, so
They're
I
putting
don't.
luxury apartments up there.
Okay.
Where did you say? I'm sorry.
Like a-
Well, the liquor, they're building 3 luxury apartments. up
That
there.
came before the planning board back.
Application. Yeah, well, yeah. Right, no public comment online, we have a motion to close the public comment period. So moved. And second,
Second.
on favor of closing public comment period? Aye. Okay. With my gratitude for your continued service, everyone, thank you so much for being here. Our next meeting is on the 10th, is that right?
Yes,
In the
March
morning?
10th, in the morning, yeah, Monday, March 10th.
All right, well, many thanks.
Motion
Good luck.
to adjourn.
Oh, motion to adjourn, I'm sorry. We didn't get to it.
So moved.
All right, please. All right, all in favor of adjourning, please say aye. Aye. So we are adjourned.
All right.
been sick for a couple weeks, but, I'm finally like feeling like a functional human being in the last week. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I don't know.
A lot better.